Donna Haraway, who was born in 1944, is an American scholar and author known for her contributions in the fields of feminist theory, animal, science, and technology studies. She was taught by Catholic nuns in her earlier life. She majored in zoology and studied evolutionary philosophy and theology before receiving her PhD at Yale University. Her dissertation was about the use of metaphor in shaping experiments in experimental biology, which in edited form became her book, Crystals, Fabrics, and Fields: Metaphors of Organicism in 20th Century Developmental Biology. Haraway taught history of science and women's studies at the University of Hawaii between 1971 and 1974, then at Johns Hopkins University between 1974 and 1980. She is a professor emerita in the History of Consciousness and Feminist Studies departments at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she started working in 1980. A Virgo, Simians, Cyborgs, and Women. The Reinvention of Nature was compiled from her essays written between 1978 and 1989 and was published in 1991. The underlying current in all is about how to exist in a world riddled with constructs dominations of race, colonialism, class, gender, and sexuality. Part 1 examines the scientific constructs created in the various studies of primates and its effects on feminist struggles. One suggestion Haraway makes is how animals live and relate to their environments may have little to do with us. Quoting R.M. Yerkes and his work in eugenics and primatology, she points that his aim was not to study the animal's natural life, but rather how to manipulate them to demonstrate the possibility of recreating man himself in the image of a generally acceptable ideal, who would neatly fill the allocated slot in the society. Haraway talks about how between the First World War and the 1990s, the focus shifted from psychobiology to sociobiology, from organism to systems, from human engineering to population control. Systems design strives for optimization, not the perfection of the individual, and she posits that sociobiology is the science of capitalism, and science's constructs have followed its metaphors. Marriage as market exchange, cooperation as a management problem, altruism as a self-destructing behavior, scarcity and competition as the basis. So, is a feminist socialist science possible? She asks. Not before we realize our social constructs are capitalist and patriarchal in essence, and not before we attempt at creating an alternative myth to explain it all. Feminism, she says, is in part a project for the reconstruction of public life and public meanings, a search for creating a myth about life, similar to what science does. One difficulty lies in the plethora of scientific study constructs that have been done until recently, most with a male bias under patriarchy's light. This inheritance of knowledge is making it so difficult to come up with alternative narratives that she says, gender is an unavoidable condition of observation. So also are class, race, and nation. Yet she moves on. Despite important differences, all the modern feminist meanings of gender have roots in Simone de Beauvoir's claim that one is not born a woman. Mentioning R. Stoller's concept of gender identity in the 1960s, formulated as sex being related to biology and gender being related to culture, she asserts that obligatory heterosexuality is central to the oppression of women. Gail Rubin, if the sexual property system were reorganized in such a way that men did not have overriding rights in women, and if there were no gender, the entire Oedipal drama would be a relic. In short, feminism must call for a revolution in kinship. Haraway describes her cyborg manifesto that follows as an effort to build an ironic political myth faithful to feminism, socialism, and materialism. Irony is about contradictions that do not resolve into larger wholes, even dialectically, about the tension of holding incompatible things together because both or all are necessary and true. With the 20th century, the distinctions between human and animal, human animal and machine, physical and non-physical have become ambiguous, she says. Therefore, we can imagine a cyborgian existence with partial identities and contradictory standpoints. It is the simultaneity of breakdowns that cracks the matrices of domination and opens geometric possibilities. Cyborg imagery can suggest a way out of the maze of dualisms in which we have explained our bodies and our tools to ourselves. This is a dream not of a common language, but of a powerful infidel heteroglossia. Every story that begins with original innocence and privileges, the return to wholeness imagines the drama of life to be individuation, separation, the birth of the self, the tragedy of autonomy, the fall into writing, alienation, that is, war, tempered by imaginary respite in the bosom of the other. These plots are ruled by reproductive politics. This I found to be a powerful attempt at handling the enormous task of finding oneself mired in overwhelming history and braving a new myth. She proposes regeneration instead of rebirth. Possible easy criticism could be about the quick eagerness and enthusiasm of embracing the new technologies at the time, and also about remaining too much in theory land, and also about the negative connotations of an ironic approach. Yet embracing as an alternative to be explored seems more restoring compared to stale readings of power and domination. The next chapter is about partial perspectives promising objective vision. The only way to find a larger vision is to be somewhere particular. She says being everywhere and nowhere, as in relativism, denies responsibility and escapes criticism. Boundaries materialize with social interaction or with mapping practices, but boundaries shift and are fluid, she says. And with this imperfect stitching together of realities, we can join with others without claiming to be another. On self and other differences and the immune system discourse, the immune system is a plan for meaningful action to construct and maintain the boundaries for what may count as self and other in the crucial realms of the normal and the pathological, a highly militarized construct of science. Sex and reproduction are constructed as investment strategies. Diseases are seen as malfunctions of the system or problems arising at the boundaries. Haraway reminds once again, one is not born an organism, that is a construct. And what counts as a unit, a one, is highly problematic. Individuality is a strategic defense problem. Haraway stresses that all this does not mean therapeutic action should be denied, but a new perspective could be beneficial where we don't think in terms of impermeable boundaries. Context is co-structure, co-text, and not simply surrounding information. Haraway further explores Niels Jern's network theory in immunology, where self and other become fluid. In this theory, the immune system is able to regulate itself by only using itself. Molecules are able to act both as antibodies and are also able to mirror antigens for the production of antibodies. There is no passive waiting for invasion. In a sense, there could be no exterior antigenic structure, no invader that the immune system had not already seen and mirrored internally. Self and other lose their rationalistic oppositional quality and become subtle plays of partially mirrored readings and responses. Haraway also questions what is perceived as invasion, giving the example of how the colonized people were perceived as the invader and the threat to white people. As sober as she remains all through the book, despite remaining mostly theoretical, she says, "The world for us may be thoroughly denatured, but it is not any less consequential. When is a self enough of a self that its boundaries become central to entire institutionalized discourses in medicine, war, and business?" The text is dense as Haraway has an interdisciplinary approach, making allusions to a myriad of contexts all the time, and I huffed and puffed my way through until I got used to her style of writing. Having finished the book, I do not understand why my notes from the first half of the book say her writing feels like an assault on the art of writing, and it is as if she is taking private revenge from words, attacking and teasing with irony and sadistic intent. Yet a year after reading the book, it remains in my memory as one of the better books I've read. I was also pleasantly surprised to not find a complaining victim perspective, and instead to even find a bold attempt on the path to solving one monster of a problem. Pun intended. Her suggestion for the blurring of identities have been criticized for creating probable problems in human rights and social justice. Probably so, yet new and original ideas usually take time to settle, if will not be lost in the depths of history, to be excavated later. As she emphasizes, her suggestions are not meant as a perfect, polished, and packaged solution, and neither do they need to be.